Welcome to Astrology and Psychotherapy. In this episode, I want to explore this idea around how we learn astrology and how we view astrology and especially how your personal understandings and your personal experiences of astrology are really important, are valid, and are essential to how you work with astrology, how you understand astrology. And I'm speaking to this to folks who maybe have a working practice, a working knowledge of astrology, and then also even this is for you also if you are just starting to learn astrology, if you just feel like you're at the very beginner's edge of wrapping your brain around what astrology means and what it means to have a chart and everywhere in between. My name is Shauna McGrath. I'm a depth psychotherapist and an astrologer, and all of my work and this podcast is inspired by my clinical practice. I see clients in private practice as a depth psychotherapist, and I incorporate astrology into the therapy process. I absolutely love this work, and I find it to be transformative and inspiring for me. And I am excited to share a part of that with you. So I was inspired to talk about this because a majority of my clients are either astrologers, astrology enthusiasts. They have an astrological worldview in some way. And this means that they see the world through astrological symbolism in a variety of different ways. And um, in therapy sessions, we don't always literally talk about the astrology. There's a varying level of volume depending on the person as far as how much we're actually talking about the astrology and when. And I think it's a lot of people when they find out that I work with astrology in the therapy process, there's this idea that that astrology is the main focal point, and that is rarely the case. I mean, that certainly can happen, but oftentimes we are talking about life, and then the astrology um, is is there. It is a lens that is available to understand, to make sense of things, to validate, and to kind of help us have like a frame for what's going on. And so in this process, um, often my clients will share what they think an astrological symbol means. And this often comes up when a client has like a realization about something astrological. And I don't know about you, but when I have realizations, it can be like really exciting. Like, oh my gosh, I have this new awareness. Maybe you have an experience and it sort of connects the dots for you. And I think that that can be really exciting and enlivening, whether it's connecting the dots with something astrologically or something in your chart, or even just something in your life that connects the dots and makes sense. And I've noticed that oftentimes there is this kind of tendency to be like, well, this is what I think, and like excitement about sharing the insight, but then also, well, I don't know if this is right, or, this is sort of like downplaying um, the insight that one has. And I am curious. I wanted to kind of like unpack kind of what's going on here because um, I'm often uh, I, I'm often learning a lot from my clients. I'm learning about life and what it means to be a human. And I think that's a part of why this work is so meaningful to me, because when I have the honor of sitting with someone and uh, being on a journey of self exploration and healing with them, I feel that it actually brings me closer to my own humanity, my own connection with what it means to be a human, and all of the joys and the suffering and the challenges and the paradoxes that come along with that. And when a client shares what they think an astrological symbol means, what it means to them, I'm often um, I'm often moved and inspired or blown away, or I often sort of receive a new perspective through their understanding. And oftentimes it's not something that I would have thought of, but it moves me and it sort of expands my awareness through looking at the world in the way that they're seeing it, the way that they're describing it. And uh, I have noticed that there is, like, it's sort of paradoxical. Like, I'm moved, and then also I notice that there is this downplaying when it comes to someone sharing something that they have as an inner experience versus something that they have learned from a book, like they can cite it or track it back to someone else said something. And so um I was thinking about this and kind of wondering, like, what's going on here? And I think that there's this sort of polarity between um looking to an authority for wisdom, for um having an idea versus our own personal experience, and that sometimes maybe our personal ideas and experiences, especially if there's something that is new or that we haven't read before or heard anyone say, there's no like other verifying party, so to speak. I think that that can be very vulnerable to claim, to say, this is what I think, and this is coming from me. This is not coming from someone else that, that is respectable, that has written a book or that has an authority in some way. And I think that this is, we can look at this as sort of the more patriarchal way of looking at learning, is that uh, the way that we're conditioned is to learn from a teacher or someone that has more experience. And this is often, literally learning from a teacher or citing something in books. And I think I don't want to downplay that. I think, of course, that is really important. And books and teachers are a wealth of inspiration and education. And your personal experience, what comes up for you as you're reading or as you are learning or as you are just moving about your life, what comes up for you from the inside out, that is also a piece of your understanding symbolism, whether that is astrological symbolism or understanding the symbolism in tarot or the I Ching or your dreams or synchronicity. Um, Astrology is a symbolic language, uh, and the psyche speaks in symbols. And my experience is that there's kind of like two different ways of working with symbolic languages. The first one is that we understand more collectively what a symbol means. We could say archetypally, The archetypes are collective in that an archetype is basically just a way of saying that it is a symbol that is present in all places, in all time. So, for example, birth is an archetype. Death is an archetype. Mm, uh, we could say gravity is an archetype. Um, Something that we all experience, no matter uh, the time or place, throughout cultures, throughout time. So there's kind of like understanding archetypes in that way, understanding, suffering, sacrifice, these are archetypes. And then understanding symbolism that is more personal to you, kind of like creating your own vocabulary system for symbols. And so this can be very different from person to person, where um, maybe an animal reminds you of a particular person. Um, Maybe a feeling in your body signals something particular to you. When you have, like, let's say, tension in your throat or in your shoulders, archetypally, that may mean that there's a constriction in the voice, that there is mm, feeling, maybe it's a blockage in the voice, or maybe there's an anxiety, or maybe there is fear around speaking. Maybe you have been criticized or punished for speaking your mind. And so there is a protective measure of constriction that's been created in that place. Um, so that's the more archetypal. It's like we all experience the throat as a vocal place, a vocal center. Um, And for someone who maybe has had experiences with the throat, like maybe they've had medical issues around the jaw or the throat, um, or maybe, I don't know why this is just coming to my mind. Like maybe someone had an animal, like a bird, with that had like really strong coloring on the throat area. And so sensation around the throat reminds them of childhood experiences with that particular animal. Um, I don't know. Uh, but it's kind of like we're understanding the archetypal symbolism, and then we're understanding, okay, what does a symbol mean to you? When you see a certain color, does that remind you of something from your personal life? Maybe it doesn't even remind you of something from your personal life, but maybe you get a like happy feeling from the color, from like a dark blue, even though typically folks that see dark blue, they associate that with like more somber, but for you it feels uplifting in some way, like these kinds of things. And so um, I think that in the I'm sort of like, stick with me here. We're sort of like going on a tangent, but I'm bringing it back to with astrology. I think that because of the way that our world works and because the way that our mind works, like we want to know the answer. We want to know the right way. We want to have a sense of security in the knowing that we have the right answer, the right understanding, etc. Um, and so I think in the astrology world, when we try to learn anything, including astrology, there's this tendency to sort of focus on, okay, what are the archetypes of the planetary symbols, of the signs, of the like what are the universal symbolisms around the astrological symbols, whether that is a house, a sign, a planet, an aspect, etc., a transit. And I think that so often I feel that a sort of a piece of learning and experiencing astrology that I really value, that I want to see sort of like bolstered, is our personal experiences with astrology, because this is so important. And I think that um, my mind is going in a lot of different directions because I'm also going like, okay, well, how do we do that? And I have more to say about that. Um, but I think that when I'm talking about this, what I mean is sort of like you get to create your own symbolic vocabulary for what astrology means to you, for what Saturn means to you, what Mars means to you, what Venus means to you. And that this process is like learning a new language, but it's about going inside and reflecting on how you experience things, how things land for you, how things hit for you. And we can do this in a variety of different ways. I think that we do this through learning about the universal symbols and then noticing how we see the universal symbols or the archetypes in our life, and then how we relate to the archetypes, how we experience different things. And um, I think that we can also do that through tracking the astrology, whether you listen to um, an app or YouTube videos or podcasts or whatever. As you're listening to these things, I think that we can also cultivate a sense of listening with a curious and inquirious kind of mind. So that we're like taking in the info and then we're kind of like chewing on it. We're like digesting it. And how does this, like, does this make sense to you? Does it not make sense to you? What kind of connections do you make um, to something? Like when you're listening to, let's say, like a weekly forecast, um, what strikes you in what that person is talking about? And how does it relate to your life? What does it make you think of? Um, and I think that this is really important because in order to really to live a symbolic life, to live a life that is connected. And when I say that, I mean where it's sort of getting back to our roots of humanity, where um, we see the world as a living organism, where we are in the world and the world is in us, and that there is this connection that we can't always tangibly pin down or see, but that there is this feeling of feedback. And this is Carl Jung's term synchronicity, that is the feedback. And um, that in order to live that life, that symbolic way of living, which I find really exciting and enlivening, that in order to do that, we kind of have to like have a sense of chewing on the information that we're learning, that our personal experience and our inquiry, like, what does this mean to me? What do I know from this? That is essential. And I think that we need both. I find myself thinking this a lot, that we need a multitude of things, that like, yes, we need to learn the practical things in the practical ways via books, via teachers, etc. And then also learn from our personal experience, and that kind of like looking at those two together so that we have a personal experience and then we look more into that. We don't just take it as uh, the truth, that we're like, okay, this is what this means to me. This is a personal and valid meaning. Um, and I think like going sort of like deeper and looking at this at a psychological level too, like what happens here when we disown this personal experience. I think that there's a tendency for folks who were raised as women, or folks who identify as more feminine, either through their personal experiences or their embodiment. And I think that for folks who have that woman feminine identity, there is this tendency in the culture to say, I don't know, or I, you know, I, I need someone to tell me. I'm not sure. Like, this is what I think, but I don't know. There's kind of like the arising of the personal experience of the inner wisdom, and then like the default setting is to sort of like couch that in, well, I don't know. Let's not take this seriously. And I would encourage, and I'm saying this is something that I work on also. Um, we cannot escape our cultural conditioning. It is a continued process of mm, repatterning and exploring how our culture affects us. Anyways, so I think that I would love for us to take our inner experiences more seriously, to honor the wisdom that arises from our musings, from our intuitions, from our daydreams and our fantasies, and that this is valid info. We don't always know what we want to do with it. It's not always actionable, and I think that is the nature of the inner experience. Is It's often subtle, and it does often require a bit more of kind of like a figuring out or fleshing out. And sometimes we don't know what we want to do with it, for some time, and that's okay. Everything that we think about does not have to be actionable. Sometimes its purpose is to comfort or inspire or validate, or simply to have an inner experience that moves us psychically. So, so I'm curious what this brings up for you, and I'm curious what this makes you think of. And I would, as always, I love to hear from you and how things are landing from you. Um, the core, if I have a core message here, and I appreciate you listening to these, because this podcast, my intention is for it to be a more spiral, philosophical way of exploring things. So, um, I'm getting comfortable with, on this podcast, I'm not here to like provide an answer. It's more about it is about inquiry. It's about asking these questions. And so I think the core contemplation that I'm circling around here is that I find when I work with folks that I am always like so curious about what someone else's personal experience is, and that um, when we're working from a depth psychological perspective, we're always curious about what is knocking around in the unconscious, and that our connection to the unconscious is through the symbolic. And the symbolic arises through, of course, astrology, and then also our musings, our insights, our intuitions, our daydreams, the things that we're just sort of like very subtly, softly thinking about. This is our connection to the unconscious. And when we connect in that way, we go deeper into ourselves, and we have it's like there's an insight that can happen, and I think that there's also this like embodied experience of more of ourselves coming online. And that is, to me, that is amazing. And that is more amazing um, and meaningful than anything that we could logically learn. But again, of course, sometimes the logic uh, invokes that feeling. Hmm. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Um, My name is Shauna McGrath. I am a psychotherapist. And if this is something that interests you, I would, as always, I love hearing from you and how things are landing. And also, I am accepting new clients. If you're interested in working with me for psychotherapy or for astrological counseling, you can visit my website to find out more about me and my work, theastropsyche.com. I'm wishing you a wonderful week, a wonderful month, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.